When I opened my eyes, I didn't see my husband's face. Just the pale blue walls of the hospital room, the soft beep of monitors, and a nurse adjusting my foreline. My chest ached, a deep, dull pain that reminded me I'd survived something serious. The surgery had gone well, or so the nurse said. But it wasn't until I reached for my phone that I realized something far more dangerous had just happened. The first thing I saw was a text from Colin. "This marriage was never real to me. You'll understand soon enough. Goodbye." At first, I thought I was still groggy from the anesthesia. I blinked. Read it again. I tapped into our joint banking app, hoping, desperately hoping, it was some kind of joke. The balance read, $0. I stared at the screen, willing the numbers to change. Nothing. I tried our savings. Our retirement fund. The emergency account. Every single one was drained. Gone. The nurse must have noticed the shift in my breathing because she leaned over, concern on her face. "Mrs. Graves? Are you all right?" I nodded, even as my entire world tilted beneath me. "Could you call my sister?" "Not my husband. My sister." Minutes later, Sarah burst into the room, her eyes wild with worry. I handed her my phone. She gasped. "Oh my God. He really did it." I nodded. "He thinks he's won." "But Elena," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "That's everything. That's your life savings." I turned to look at her. Calm. Cold. Ready. "No, Sarah. That's what he thinks. But I've been 3 steps ahead of Colin Graves since the day I saw that first red flag. And now, he's about to learn exactly what that means. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 2 years ago, I almost ignored the first sign. It was a receipt. Just a crumpled little slip of paper I found in the pocket of Colin's jeans while doing laundry. A hotel in Charleston. The date didn't match any business trip he'd told me about. When I asked him, he didn't even flinch. "Oh, that? I met a supplier for lunch. Didn't I tell you? They were only in town for the day." I wanted to believe him. So I did. Back then, we were 6 years into marriage, co-owners of a health food brand that had finally turned profitable. We had dreams, expanding the business, buying a lake house, starting a family. Or so I thought. But that receipt never left my mind. And soon, there were more. He started working late more often. Passwords changed. He forgot our anniversary dinner. I remember one night, lying awake, staring at the ceiling while he snored next to me, wondering how you could share a bed with someone and still feel completely alone. I decided then, if Colin was hiding something, I wasn't going to confront him unarmed. I wasn't going to cry, or beg, or ask for honesty he had no intention of giving. I was going to gather proof. Quietly. Thoroughly. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. Her name was Maya, and she specialized in financial abuse and marital fraud. I told her everything. The shifting behavior. The hidden transactions. The gut feeling I couldn't shake. She didn't call me paranoid. She didn't even look surprised. "You'd be amazed how many women come to me with this exact same story," she said gently. "But you're doing the right thing. Let's make sure you're protected." Over the next 6 months, I moved like a shadow. I restructured the business. Shifted my shares into a blind trust under my maiden name. Opened a secure account at a credit union in a different state, just in case. I quietly bought out our storefront lease using a shell company I formed with the help of Maya's team. All legal. All traceable. Just not by Colin. Every time he kissed me goodbye or poured me a glass of wine at dinner, I smiled back, played the role. But my mind was already building an escape route. What I didn't know then was just how fast I'd need it. Because 6 weeks later, I collapsed in the middle of our store from what felt like a stomach cramp, and woke up in a hospital bed, post-surgery, reading Colin's goodbye message while our accounts sat bone dry. He thought my illness would make me too weak to fight back. He didn't realize. That's when I'm at my strongest. I had 10 stitches across my abdomen, a morphine drip in my arm, and exactly one person I trusted in the world sitting beside me. Rachel. My best friend since college. The one person who knew I kept a second phone hidden in the lining of my handbag, and the only one who wouldn't panic when I told her what Colin had done. She didn't ask why. She didn't scream or cry. She just opened her laptop, pulled up the encrypted folder we'd set up together last year, and whispered, "Let's begin." While the nurses checked my vitals, Rachel sent the first email, to Maya. Subject line, urgent, activate Plan Indigo. I'll admit, I smiled at that. Because even in the middle of my worst nightmare, I had a code name for taking back my life. Plan Indigo included a full financial freeze order. Maya had already drawn it up and secured preliminary court approval the moment I went into surgery, just in case Colin tried something stupid. He did. Within hours, the legal team filed emergency motions, locking every asset Colin had access to, including the yacht he secretly leased under his cousin's name and the business account he thought was cleverly disguised as a pet food distribution company. Spoiler, it wasn't. Meanwhile, Rachel and I used my backup phone to access the cloud surveillance cameras I'd installed in our home months ago. The motion sensors had picked up everything. Colin walking into our bedroom. Colin opening my safe. Colin shoving wads of cash into a black duffel bag I hadn't seen in years. He wasn't just taking the money. He was taking my life. And yet, what struck me the most wasn't the betrayal. It was how calm he looked. How certain he was that I'd never see this footage. That I'd never get up from that hospital bed. Rachel paused the video. He's headed to the airport. I nodded. Good. Let him board the plane. You're not going to stop him? Oh, we will, I said, my voice even. But not yet. Let him think he's won. Let him feel the thrill of escape. The bigger the ego, the harder the fall. And Colin? He was in for a brutal landing. The night before the surgery, I laid awake in that sterile hospital bed, watching the glow of the monitors cast faint green light across the ceiling. I'd already said my goodbyes to Mom and Ellie, pretending it was just in case. But really, I needed them to believe I trusted Michael. He had to think I was still the naive woman who handed over her life, her money, and her heart without a second thought. At exactly 6:45 a.m., Michael walked in holding a thermos of coffee and a bouquet of bright tulips, my favorite. I wondered if he even remembered that, or if the girl he was planning to run off with had Googled it for him. He kissed my forehead and said, "You're going to be fine, honey. I'll be right here when you wake up." I smiled, memorizing the way his voice trembled just a little. It wasn't concern. It was guilt. By 7:20, they wheeled me into pre-op. I caught Ellie's eye as I passed her, 3 slow blinks. That was our signal. While I was being prepped for anesthesia, Ellie was slipping out the side entrance of the hospital and hopping into Sam's SUV. The two of them had been parked near our home for the past 3 nights, tracking Michael's movements. Every phone call. Every ATM visit. Every strange meeting that happened just a little too late at night for someone with a sick wife. I don't remember the moment I went under. But I remember waking up. Not just to the pain or the dryness in my throat, but to the silence. My phone was gone. So was my wedding ring. The nurse said Michael had taken them both for safekeeping. It was only when Ellie burst into the room with a laptop and a file folder the size of a small suitcase that I knew. It had begun. Phase 2's rolling, she whispered. You ready for this? I nodded, slowly. The anesthesia made everything hazy, but not hazy enough to forget what he'd done. She opened the laptop, revealing live GPS tracking. Michael's red pin was blinking steadily, right at our bank. Sam's got eyes on him, she said, flipping through the folder. Here's the ATM withdrawal logs, the account transfers, and, get this, an invoice for 2 one-way flights to Costa Rica under fake names. I stared at the screen. The man I once trusted with every part of me had packed up my life and was about to vanish with it. Let him go, I whispered. Let him think it's working. Because Michael had no idea he was walking into a trap I'd built from the inside out, with cameras, trackers, legal power of attorney already reassigned, and one very motivated IRS contact watching his every financial move. And in the next 48 hours, the net would close. Michael must have thought he was starring in his own little spy movie. Just before noon, he walked into the downtown branch of the credit union we'd used for years, wore a baseball cap like that would somehow make him invisible. Sam was across the street in a parked car, camera ready. Ellie had patched into the live feed from the bank's public-facing security cameras. We watched as Michael leaned casually on the counter, handed over ID, and made a big show of signing withdrawal slips. And then, just like that, $862,000 was gone. The teller handed him a cashier's check. He tucked it into his jacket like a prize, smiling to himself. Back in the hospital, I was sitting up now, propped on pillows, a little pale but fully awake, watching it all unfold like I'd written the script. Because in a way, I had. Sam followed him to a notary's office, then to Harold's apartment on Sycamore Street. I already knew Harold was in on it, his phone records, the emails, even the receipts from that Caribbean villa they tried to put in his name. They thought if it wasn't under Michael's, I couldn't touch it. Cute. Meanwhile, Ellie had gotten the judge on the phone. Judge Navarro owed her a favor from law school days, and we had enough documentation to file for an emergency freeze order on every joint asset, plus a fraud investigation through the state's Financial Crimes Division. By nightfall, Michael and Harold were sitting at a sushi bar near the airport, raising their glasses in celebration. Harold said, "Cheers to freedom." Michael said, "By the time she knows what hit her, we'll be sipping margaritas in Tamarindo." Back at the hospital, I was holding my phone like a scalpel. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the pure satisfaction of watching justice take shape. I dialed a number I had memorized months ago. Special Agent Keller, the voice on the other end said. "It's time," I replied. "You'll find both targets at Kuro on Terminal Boulevard. They're planning to fly out before sunrise. You'll want to move fast, one of them has my stolen passport." There was a pause. Then, understood. "We're already tracking them. We'll move." I hung up and turned to Ellie. "Get the flash drive ready for court. Tomorrow, we finish this." And for the first time in months, I fell asleep without a single knot in my chest. Because the next morning, Michael was going to learn what it felt like to lose everything. Not because I wanted revenge, but because he thought I'd never see it coming. And that was his last mistake. The next morning came with the kind of quiet that feels like the universe holding its breath. Michael had no idea that while he was dreaming of palm trees and stolen money, a very different kind of vacation had just been booked for him, with a first-class ticket to federal court. He and Harold made it all the way to the security line at the international terminal. Sam was already there, pretending to check departure boards. Ellie, from a safe distance, was on a Zoom call with Judge Navarro's clerk, ready to file the final emergency order once Michael stepped through TSA. And me? I was being wheeled into a small courtroom on the 3rd floor of the downtown courthouse. Pale, yes. Weak? Maybe. But present. And ready. A courtroom deputy peeked in, then nodded at my attorney. "They've been detained. They'll be brought in shortly." Minutes later, I heard the click of handcuffs before I saw him. Michael froze when he saw me sitting there. His jaw slackened, his eyes darted toward the judge, then the lawyers, then back to me. As if trying to compute how I had risen from a hospital bed and beaten him here. He looked like a man who'd just walked into his own funeral and realized he was the guest of honor. The judge cleared his throat. "We're here today for an emergency hearing on financial misconduct, fraudulent transfer of marital assets, and potential interstate flight to avoid prosecution. Ms. Doyle, do you have documentation to support your claim? My lawyer stood and handed over a thick folder. We do, Your Honor. And we also have something better, audio and video evidence, including real-time surveillance from yesterday's withdrawal, travel plans, and coordination between the two defendants. The room went silent as the first clip played over the courtroom's monitor, Michael laughing, toasting sushi with Harold, saying, "She'll be out cold for at least another day. We've got time." The judge removed his glasses, set them down, and looked straight at Michael. "In 20 years on the bench, I've seen some vile betrayals, Mr. Doyle. But orchestrating a theft while your wife is unconscious from surgery?" He shook his head. "That's a new low." Michael opened his mouth, then shut it. His lawyer whispered something, but I could see the panic rising in both of them. Then came the ruling. All shared assets are to be frozen immediately. Ms. Doyle is to be reinstated access to all individual and business accounts. The defendants are restricted from leaving the state, pending criminal investigation. Bail will be considered at a later date. The gavel dropped with a sharp crack. Michael was let out, still trying to look back at me. I didn't return his gaze. He didn't deserve that dignity. I leaned toward my lawyer and whispered, "One step left." She smiled. "Let's finish this." 3 months passed. Michael pled not guilty to all charges, of course. Harold turned on him within weeks, cutting a plea deal in exchange for testifying against the man he once called his brother-in-arms. I didn't attend every hearing. I had a business to run and a life to rebuild, but I was there for the verdict. I wore a navy suit and heels, my hair pulled back, eyes calm. Not out of arrogance. Out of closure. The jury took just under 4 hours. Guilty. Wire fraud. Bank fraud. Attempted flight to avoid prosecution. And, what no one expected, conspiracy to commit identity theft, because Michael had used my information to open a credit line in a fake LLC weeks before my surgery. When they read the sentence, 8 years, with no chance of parole for 5, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. Afterward, I walked out of the courtroom and into the sunlight. Sam was waiting by the courthouse steps, holding a bouquet of sunflowers and a paper bag with my favorite ginger cookies. "You really were 3 steps ahead," he said. "No," I smiled. 4. That night, I hosted a quiet dinner in the back garden of my flagship store. Sarah brought wine. My team brought laughter. For the first time in months, I felt joy that wasn't layered with fear. As we cleared plates, I stood up and tapped a fork to my glass. "I've spent most of this year dealing with betrayal, deception, and a man who thought I was too soft to protect myself," I said. He was wrong. And to any woman who's ever been told she's too emotional, too trusting, too naive, let me be clear, there is nothing soft about surviving. They raised their glasses. "To survival," Sarah said. "To strategy," Sam added. "To knowing who the hell you are," I said. And that night, beneath a string of garden lights and a sky finally clear of storms, I knew I had reclaimed more than just my money. I had reclaimed my voice. And I would never let it be taken again. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a financial resilience summit in Austin. The topic was surviving financial abuse, red flags, recovery, and revenge done right. I almost declined. The thought of standing on a stage and reliving what I'd been through made my stomach twist. But then I remembered all the women I'd met since, women who whispered their stories in quiet corners, in DMs, in parking lots after community events. So I said yes. The auditorium was packed. Some were professionals, some survivors, many both. I stepped up to the mic, heart steady, heels firm. "My name is Caroline Shaw. And a year ago, my husband emptied our bank accounts while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. He thought he'd broken me. But all he did was underestimate me. You could have heard a pin drop. I walked them through it, not the trauma, but the tactics. The trusts. the tracking. The 3 steps that kept me whole while he tried to erase me. Afterward, a woman waited by the side of the stage. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her wedding ring was gone, but the pale indentation still clung to her finger. "I don't know where to start," she said, voice trembling. "You just did," I replied. That moment lit a fire in me I didn't know I still had. A month later, I launched Steps Ahead, a nonprofit dedicated to helping survivors of financial betrayal protect their futures. We offered legal clinics, resource guides, and perhaps most importantly, community. The day we opened our doors, I looked around the room and saw Sarah helping set up chairs. Sam had donated the office printer. Even my old accountant volunteered time. That afternoon, a young woman walked in, holding a baby on one hip and a manila envelope on the other. "I saw your video," she said. "I think I need help." I took the envelope, nodded, and motioned her in. And in that moment, I realized something. Michael didn't just try to rob me of my money. He tried to rob me of my purpose. But now, standing here, surrounded by women who refused to stay broken, I knew. He failed. 3 years later, I was sipping coffee on the porch of my lake house in Vermont. The leaves had just started to turn, casting gold and crimson across the water. The life I had now wasn't the one I'd planned. But it was better. My phone buzzed. A letter from the state penitentiary had arrived, forwarded from my old address. I knew who it was from. I opened it, more out of curiosity than anything else. "Caroline. I've had a lot of time to think. I was wrong. About everything. You were always smarter than I gave you credit for. I'm sorry I hurt you. Michael." I folded the letter and dropped it into the fireplace without a word. Sorry, too late. Later that day, I drove into town to meet Sarah for lunch. We sat outside, watching tourists snap photos of the fall colors. She smiled over her iced tea. "You know," she said, "you never told me what happened to the bracelet. The one he bought you that Christmas." I reached into my purse and pulled it out. Except now, it had something new engraved on the inside. 3 steps ahead. I wear it as a reminder. Not of him. But of me. Of the woman who refused to go down quietly. Who turned betrayal into blueprint. Who helped others find their way out of the dark. Because the truth is, some storms come not to destroy you, but to clear your path. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is building a life so full, so free, that no one can ever take it from you again.